Hey guys, Jobo here. Sorry for the delay on the theories. Been pretty busy this past week, but I'm looking to cover or recover and add additional information to my previous theory that Momonosuke is Uranus. And also, I would like to, generally speaking, discuss some of the issues that you guys and others have brought up in regards to this theory to sort of better explain why I think that this is the most likely thing to be true at the moment. So firstly, when I originally discussed the theory that Momonosuke is Uranus, the majority of people responded with one of two things. Either this theory is plausible, but they just don't want it to be true, or two, that basically the ancient weapons are named after Greek gods. You have Uranus, who is the god of the sky, Pluton, god of the underworld, and Poseidon, god of the sea. And a lot of people use these, specifically Poseidon being the god of the sea and Shirahoshi having powers over sea kings, to basically say that Uranus has to be related to the sky. Oda has already set this up. But I will say this, we know that Pluton is a warship, and also Pluton, the god, also known as Hades, is the god of the underworld. What does a warship have to do with the underworld? There's a very vague connection in which there's a ferry that carries people across, or spirits across the river Styx in the underworld, but that isn't exactly a warship. That connection there is very tentative at best. I don't think that you can say for a fact that Uranus has to relate to the sky. Going back to this idea that Oda has set up Pluton, the god of the underworld, to represent a warship, I think it's really interesting that there's a vague correlation there between a warship and the god of the underworld. You also have a vague correlation between Momonosuke and possibly a god of the sky, which is that Momonosuke is actually a dragon, or he ate a dragon food. Now I understand that isn't necessarily something that is concrete evidence that he is Uranus. It's more of a coincidence. But the correlation there is of approximately the same value as it would be for a warship to represent the god of the underworld. Some other people don't feel like Zunisha is actually strong enough to be considered an ancient weapon, but and I've sort of changed my opinion on this from my last post. So, however, the premise of Momonosuke being Uranus really hinges on him being able to control more than just Zunisha. I realize Zunisha is 1,000 years old. Before I said that maybe Zunisha could be an ancient weapon by herself, given the fact that she just one-shotted Jack. But let's take that back for a moment, and let me clarify my opinion, which is that I believe that if Momonosuke is Uranus and this power relates to his power that he's shown over Zunisha, then he should be able to control more creatures than just Zunisha. Whether that's a herd of animals, or herd of elephants, or other kinds of animals, I can't say at this moment at all. Although I have some speculations. There was a really good point brought up that for an ancient weapon, it makes a lot of sense for it to be related to sea creatures, or in this case sea kings, because the world of One Piece is mostly water. You can't travel across the world on land, whereas water connects every single place. So it seems difficult to believe that Momonosuke, if he has control over land creatures, for him to somehow be able to transport them from island to island. It seems like they would be pretty much landlocked, especially given their size. I understand Zunisha is walking on water or something like that, but unless it's a herd of elephants, I don't see that being a common trait. It just seems kind of random, but we still don't know how her legs work, or if they're long, or if she's actually like sitting on something, or I don't exactly know what's going on there. But that's a very solid point. But I will say that, as I've just said, I believe that Momonosuke should be able to control, if this power is Uranus and it's the same kind of power that he used over Zunisha, he should be able to control other creatures, specifically flying creatures, for instance dragons. But at this point, this is completely speculation, but I don't think that we should limit our scope of view of the powers of Uranus, if it is indeed controlling land creatures, to just land creatures that walk. I think that it would also include land creatures that fly. The last main criticism of this theory is that because we already have a power similar to it in Shirahoshi and the power of Poseidon, that's the biggest reason why this can't be true. And I just don't agree with that. Oda is a genius, don't get me wrong, but he does repeat ideas a lot. There's not a lot of mythical powers in the world of One Piece. You just have a few sources of things that can't be explained. For instance, we have Devil Fruit, and then Devil Fruit is basically converted into thousands of or hundreds of different ideas based on this one concept of a devil fruit. You have all sorts of devil fruit powers. Then the second major form of magic is hockey. And then hockey again is converted into different forms, same as devil fruit. Here we have another power from Poseidon. How does this power work? A lot of people speculate that it's a kind of hockey of some sort. But if it is a magical power, then it would make sense that it would have different forms. And then you would have someone born with the sea version and someone born with the land version. But in all things magic related to One Piece, there isn't a great diversity of things that are just solely unique to one person. And so I think that using this logic, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Oda would have designed a power very similar to Poseidon's, but at the same time inherently different. So with all this being said, I still do believe that Momonosuke being Uranus is the best guess that we currently have for the identity or powers of Uranus, and I also believe that it is more likely than anything else until we learn more about Momo's powers and how it could be potentially handicapped. So with this in mind, I tried to find additional evidence for things that I think are most likely given that Momo is Uranus. I believe that it's most likely that Momo can control more than just Zunisha. He can control other creatures, and it won't be just a herd of giant elephants. I believe that it will be a diversity of different kinds of creatures. So is there any evidence within One Piece of potentially a creature or a giant creature? We'll call them land gods. Is there any other land gods presented in the world of One Piece? And interestingly enough, there is, and it's even tied to the Void Century, which is really cool. So we're still learning a little bit about the Ancient Kingdom, but we do know a couple things that are really vital to this theory. First of all, we know that Shandora was an ally to the Ancient Kingdom. And we know this because Shandora was protecting the poneglyphs of the Ancient Kingdom that the Ancient Kingdom created to describe the lost history. So this is going to be semi-difficult to explain, but I want you to bear with me. So there's 3 different time frames that we're given a clue to of the history of Shandora. First of all, present day. Present day, Shandora is in the sky. It's on a sky island. It was blown up by the knock-up stream. 400 years ago, it was on Jaya. They were still tribal people there, and they were still protecting the poneglyph. Before 400 years ago, they were some great kingdom that was basically destroyed during some war. And I think that we can assume that this was the Void Century, that when the Shandora was defeated. So I don't know if many of you remember or not, but back in the Skypeia arc, we saw a giant snake. And we also learned during the flashback with Mont Blanc Nolan that this snake was born 400 years ago and is currently 400 years old, and it had an ancestor that was killed 400 years ago. What I find to be particularly interesting about this snake is that we see other giant creatures around on other islands, and it's not as common or uncommon as you would think. However, this is now the second example that we have of a giant creature that is the only giant creature given on a specific island. We learn within the arc that Nola, which is what the snake is called, that she is actually bigger than she would be otherwise if she hadn't had grown up on the Sky Island. However, during the flashback where we see her ancestor who was killed 400 years ago, that to begin with, her ancestors were already almost as large as her, but not quite. And as a bit of a fun fact, she is actually the second oldest character revealed, or whose age is revealed in One Piece. The oldest being Zunisha, who's 1,000 years old. The second being Nola, who is 400 years old. And to backtrack for a second, we know that the island of Shandora was originally on the Blue Sea, and it wasn't until 400 years ago that it was blown into the sky. And we also know that Shandora was allied with the Ancient Kingdom, which the Ancient Kingdom had the weapon Uranus, which, given my speculation, if they had a person who had the ability of Uranus, then it might also make sense for them to have one of these land gods that the Uranus would have been controlling during the Void Century. Additionally, not only do we know that Nola is 400 years old, but that she had an old ancestor who was the people of Shandora's god, who they actually, when times were going bad, they would sacrifice a daughter to their god. That they had a god who is some age, whose probably history dates back to the Void Century. I think it's interesting to look at what the people of Shandora, what they value, what they are looking to protect. So during the flashback 400 years ago, they were obviously, it's very important for them to protect their poneglyph, and then they also wanted to protect the bell and the sacred forest, which were related to their ancestors, so that their ancestors could go to the afterworld or whatever. And the only other thing that they really cared about was this god of theirs. What's interesting about this is that the great warrior Kagura, he ends up killing this god, basically because the god seemed kind of corrupt, to be honest with you. But it was a big deal for him to kill him. He looks at Cricket, or looks at Nolan, and basically says, you know, you better have the cure for our people because I just killed our people's god. So if we add these three things up, if we add the things that we know first, we know that the poneglyph is related to the true history, which is related to their ancestors, and their ancestors' legacy, which they're hoping to protect. We know that the bell and the sacred forest were also related to their ancestors, so that their ancestors could, you know, move on or whatever. So it wouldn't be surprising if this third thing was also related to their ancestors, but specifically was part of the fighting force, or part of a creature that was controlled by the Ancient Kingdom and their alliance with Shandora, using the power of Uranus. So basically what I'm saying here is that Nola and her ancestor are land gods, just the same as Zunisha is, and that Momonosuke in the future story of One Piece will be able to use his powers of Uranus, if the power is related to controlling land gods, like Poseidon controls sea kings, and use it in the final battle versus the world government. So anyway, that's all I got for this theory. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to comment if you have something that you'd like to say. Subscribe if you like the kind of content that I'm bringing. Like the video if you like